I just asked Mom, do I remember her? I don't think so. You all look great. Rosens are sitting in the same aisle they always sat in. Is Howard here this morning? There's Howard back there. What about Jean Stonecipher? Is she here? There's Jean. Good to see Triconics here. And I would say all the rest of your names, except I can't remember them. I remember when this church was growing, I knew everybody's name till we hit 700 members. Then I stopped remembering last names. I only worked on first names and did fairly well at that for a while, but those days are gone. I drove around the city of Calgary. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I got down to the intersection by the hospital and I was lost. Looked at all these big buildings and I thought, where am I? My sermon this morning is entitled A Heart Condition. I'd like to have you open your Bibles with me to Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4. I'm going to begin reading there with the first verse. And again he began to teach by the sea, and a great multitude was gathered to him, so that he got into the boat and sat in it on the sea. The whole multitude was on the land facing the sea. Then he taught them many things by parables, and said to them in his teaching, "Listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. And it happened as he sowed that some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured it. Some fell on stony ground where it did not have much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it and yielded no crop. But other seed fell on good ground and yielded a crop that sprang up, increased, and produced some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. And he said to them, He who has ears to hear, let him hear." I believe that Jesus just described every person on the face of this earth in those 9 verses. So the question is, did you see yourself in this parable? When my boys were small, by the way, Nancy sends her love. I tried to twist her arm to come with me. She has so many irons in the fire. She said, I can't go, but tell them I love them and I miss them. When my boys were small, I read the text at worship one morning that says, "A new heart will I give you." By the look on their faces, I could tell what was going through their little minds. They were wondering, how does God give me a new heart? Is he going to cut me open? When I was young, I wrestled with these same questions. Some words that are spelled the same and sound the same can have 2 completely different meanings. It's called a homonym. My English teacher would be proud of me. The word heart is a good example of a homonym. You have the physical heart that pumps blood through the whole body, and then you have the spiritual heart, which the ancients called the center of the soul. Same word, two completely different meanings. I was visiting one of my parishioners in Seattle when an elderly gentleman at the same table blurted out in a loud voice, "I have a heart condition." That was followed by a little lady from across the table that said, "I'm glad I don't have a heart condition." And at that moment, the thought struck me, we all have a heart condition, in a spiritual sense as well as a physical sense. And it's this spiritual heart that we want to focus on this morning. Notice how the heart was viewed by ancient cultures from the beginning of time through the Dark Ages. The ancient Chinese believed the heart was a seat of intelligence. The ancient Greeks believed the heart was the source of thought. Aristotle taught that the heart held the soul. Homer spoke of a man who believes one thing in his heart and does another. For Abrahamic religions, a person connects with God through their heart. So with zero understanding of how the brain functions, they could only focus on the heart. They knew the beating in the chest signified life. They also knew beating harder and faster corresponded with fear, and that upon death the beating stops. So they elevated the heart to the position that's held by the brain. Science and medicine have shaped our present-day understanding that the brain is the control center for the human body. The heart is a pump that works hand in hand with the brain to keep the body functioning properly. And as we look at Jesus' parable there in Mark 4, some questions immediately arise. Those soil types were heart types. A hard heart, a shallow heart, a cluttered heart, a fruitful heart. So some questions immediately arise. What is the connection between the heart and the mind? They're two completely separate organs. But we're told that the heart is hardwired to the brain, has a direct connection to the brain. Professor David Patterson of Oxford University says the heart responds to stimuli that originates in the brain. A simple example is the emotion of blushing. We've all blushed at some time in our life. It starts with a thought and instantly sends the heart racing. Another is the emotion of fear. Starts in the brain and immediately reverberates in the heart. I can remember being fearful at different times. One time I remember something frightened me, and instantly my heart started going about 100 miles an hour. Researchers from Thomas Jefferson University tell us that chronic stress triggers the brain to send signals to the heart, leading to increased heart rate, higher blood pressure, and a surge in cortisol levels. Today we have many expressions about the heart. I have a heavy heart. Or I'm having a change of heart. These expressions and metaphors reflect centuries of folk wisdom. Because it's not the heart at all, it's the brain. So where does that leave us today here? We're talking about a parable with 4 different heart conditions.